This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
During the television break, for those of you on radio, we were talking about this new idea, this new thing starting next February. Alabama is going to have what's called the Crimson Cruise. I think we could do better than that. Can you imagine getting all the Finebaum characters together on a cruise boat? And the first night's entertainment will be our next caller from Gainesville, Georgia.
Oh, I would love to go on a cruise, Paul.
I bet you've been on a cruise.
I'm going to work on my punctuality today, Paul, because you've been really on my punctuality. So when I end a sentence, I'm going to say period.
Well, all I said last night is it wasn't really a matter of being grammatically incorrect. It's just that you never stopped talking long enough to punctuate a sentence. That was my only point.
Well, that's what I'm going to work on. Yesterday was radio gold, wasn't it?
I thought so, yeah.
I mean, Larry, he's a hoot. I mean, he truly is. That was a lot of fun squaring off of Larry.
How did you feel it went?
I don't know. I felt like, according to y'all, I mean, I must have got knocked out the first round.
Yeah, Danny and John had you going down pretty quickly.
I mean, I was laughing so hard. It was just hilarious. Like, I don't know what. Does Larry start drinking at like 10 or 12 every day? I mean, he's hilarious.
By the way, were you thrown off when he couldn't spell Utah? Is that what upset you, or discombobulated?
No, yeah, it was pretty funny because you were trying to like walk him through it, and then you made the reference to the dog track in Alabama, and he was like, "Oh, Utah!" It was pretty funny. But and then the comment about, I said, "How do you spell moron?" and M-O-W, and that was a joke to the Alabama Foundation. I saw these tweets last night saying, Matt can't spell moron. No, it was kind of a jab at Larry. It was sarcasm. It's M-O-R-O-N. That's what we may need to have, Paul. We need to have a Finebaum spelling bee. Against
I think
Larry.
That would be funny. But I'm not a good speller either. And quite frankly, nowadays with so many aides, you don't have to be a good speller.
No, you're right. I mean, you have spell check on every device.
And sometimes it's not even right, but it doesn't matter. I mean, I just like start when I'm looking up a word on my phone. I just like dialing up any number, any letter I can come up with, and hoping it pieces it together for me.
I wanted to comment on Matt from San Antonio. I don't. There's no doubt in my mind that Alabama's going to be good next year. I mean, let's be honest. Let's take all the bias out of it. Saban's a great coach. I know I pick on Saban to rile up the masses. I know sometimes people don't get the joke, but I do think, and I'm not saying Georgia's better, but I do think Alabama has a tougher road to Atlanta because the West is a lot tougher than the East. The East has been down for a long time. I mean, the West has got LSU, they've got Auburn. Now they've got Jimbo at Texas A&M. I think Matt from San Antonio spent a little bit too much stock in that. It takes 2 years for a coach to really, you looked at what Kirby did at Georgia. He walked in a great situation. It takes you 2 years to implement your system. I don't think Mullen's just going to go be instantaneously successful. He'll be successful, but it takes time to implement your program.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something, Matt. I can't believe we're having a normal conversation, but mistakes are made the first year, too. Mistakes that you won't make the second and third year, but you will lose a game on a mistake your first season often. Not always, but often.
A lot of Georgia fans, Kirby's first year, were doubting him because they went 8-5, lost to Tech, they lost to Vandy. But, Kirby was real blunt saying, we are – Kirby got a lot of good players, but we were so weak on the defensive line and the offensive line. We didn't have depth, and that's where Alabama is so good. Alabama truly, if you look at 2012, they wear teams down. That's where
that's the Saban mantra got it. To force you into submission.
And that's where, because Alabama doesn't come out and beat teams 60-0 the first quarter. the games they have lost to like Ole Miss and Johnny Mansell, those teams jumped up really quick and then tried to hold a lead and sustain Alabama from coming back. So, but are you going to A-Day? Or are y'all going to have crews at A-Day? Or y'all
I will not be there. I actually have something else to do this week, and I'm not going to be able to make it to. I'm actually going to be in Athens before. Are you? How far are you from Athens?
45 minutes. I'm going to G-Day.
Okay, I'm actually going to be in Athens tomorrow.
Do you got it personal or is it business?
Yeah, I'll actually be there tonight. I've got to go interview somebody there tomorrow.
Cool.
Secret.
Cool. Well, that hopefully you're not going to reveal some bad information on it.
No. This is actually a pretty positive thing. You'll love it when it happens.
I got you. Well, yeah, it's pretty right now.
We're doing an hour-long special on Darryl from Georgia.
No, you're not. No, God spare us all. I'm sorry.
No, I am going to be there though. Squirrel is up next. Hey, Squirrel.
Hey, thank you for taking my call.
Thank you.
I don't know. I'm just not buying Matt's apology.
Yeah, I don't know. Matt on the whatever sleep-inducing drug that he took before he called, but I think I like him better the other way.
Yeah, me too. I mean, he's just another boring caller.
Yeah.
Actually,
he's just another dog
speaking
fan.
Of his call yesterday with Larry. I mean, of all the phone feuds you've had over the years, I mean, if you ranked them, that would have to be probably the worst phone feud in caller history. And I'm serious when I say that. I mean, you've got to admit it was pretty pathetic.
Well, and again, I mean, you got to take into consideration.
Well, at 5 in the afternoon, Larry's already had 20, 25 beers, so he's not in his best. And Matt, I mean, he's just not really quick. So, it was just like two monkeys humping a football. It was just pathetic. But the last hour...
In no way would it compare to some of the great ones that you've been a part of.
No. Did I mention me?
No, I'm just saying. I mean, you've been a part of some pretty...
No. Jim, all the epic ones have been involved in Jim, and I've just been in a few of those because, I got drug in by him. But no, I did not mention anything about any of my phone feuds. And you were the one that mentioned the last hour of the show. And anyone who did not listen yesterday, I really encourage you to go back on the podcast. It was really an interesting show, an interesting hour. And I heard you dangling the mythical iPad carrot in front of Millie during the last hour of the show yesterday. And with the fact in mind that our surprise party for Jim didn't go well because we didn't have the blessing of the Don, the kissing of the ring and all that, what if some of us got together and somehow got Millie to Charlotte? What type of reception would she get at the studio?
Well,
she expressed interest in coming.
Squirrel, I appreciate you offering that, but I can't, we have I think her condition would probably be better for her to stay where she is.
Okay.
And let us come to her.
Valid. Okay, well, that's why. Hey,
and I say that Squirrel. You've probably been to studios before. They're not that big.
Sure.
There's really not that much to do. It's not like
limited mobility.
Yeah, and
and I understand that. And that again, I have enough respect for you that I asked you before if she just shows up.
And besides, I'm already out of passes for visitors. You only get like 3 a year, and
I understand.
I used mine up last week when Larry and Jim and
And one last thing. And speaking of Jim, one last thing. I've never promoted my Twitter site, but I put a tweet up today. Someone for some reason sends me various tweets regarding Jim, and someone sent me a tweet of Jim's. It was a political tweet of Jim.
Oh, really? Jim tweets about politics? I would have never known.
Yes. I sent you a copy of it today, matter of fact. And in this political tweet, he's promoting a book called The Masters of Deceit. And in this tweet, he says that he did an extensive book report on this book in 1959 during his junior year of high school.
Did he really say that?
Paul, I'm not making this up, dude. Okay. I don't make things up. He came on here last week and called me Charles Manson. He said I was worse than Charles Manson. And while you didn't have my back, you did point out to him that Charles Manson actually killed 9 people.
No, I did. I thought I was a pretty.
So I appreciate that.
Because a lot of people may not have known who Charles Manson.
I think most people know who Charles Manson is.
Well, I mean, you say that, Squirrel, but I'm willing to bet there are a lot of people out there that have no earthly idea who. I mean,
no, come on, Paul.
I mean, the murder. Well, I don't know.
Even the millennials know who
I am shocked every day of things that people don't know that happened in a different era.
Nice deflection, but how do you address this allegation that he did a book report in 1959?
When did he send out that tweet, by the way?
I don't know, but somebody sent it to me. It's from
because I'm going through his Twitter feed, and I frankly don't see it.
Okay, well, like I said, if somebody wants to go to Squirrel from MS, there's a copy of it that someone sent me. I was just asking, is his little logo, is his address on it? It looks legit. I was just wondering. You got to remember,
there are a lot of I'm not being Jim's attorney here, but I am. There are a lot of fake. There are a lot of fake Jim accounts out there.
This is, as far as I know, this is not one of them. And again, I was going to alert Jim, and I put on there that somebody hijacked Jim's account.
Why don't you send it to me again so I can see it? Because I know that this may convict me of not being a good Twitter follow. But anyway, I'll tell you what, I will ask him because he's on hold. Jim, do you, this doesn't sound like it.
I'm not going to get into these crazy things anymore with that fool. All he does is twist and same thing Rush Limbaugh did to somebody today, just lie. Pure out lie.
Did you actually say that?
Dude, you going to be like Matt, just run over me or let me talk? Well, let me talk. I'll tell you if you let me talk.
Go.
You know I'm going to talk. You don't need to ask me to talk. I can talk. Here's what happened and exactly what I did. I tweeted that my junior year in high school, I read Masters of Deceit. Here's the lie. Here's the truth where that moron just now lied. I read the book, which was written. It was written. That's what I said in the tweet. In 1959 by J. Edgar Hoover. And it's called.
Well, I actually have a copy of the tweet now. It says, written in 1959, my junior year of high school.
Did you notice he left out that word? He wants people, again, to think I'm 80 years old or whatever, which is a lie. That's all that fool is trying to do is belittle me, and that's all he's ever been about is just taking out of context everything I say.
So 59 was not your junior year, right?
No. Heck no, it wasn't even close. But I'm just saying, that's when the book was written, Paul.
Okay.
Go read the damn book, and you can see written in 1959.
Okay.
I get so mad even thinking about that fool, which he is, to me, I didn't say he's a killer, but he's as bad a person.
Well, you compared him to Charles. I mean, Charles Manson, again, for you.
Paul, I know characters. You talking about he's a character. He's a rotten character. I'm talking about Squirrel, with a model wife, and he's a pervert,
He's
a liar.
How do you know he's a pervert?
Without having committed any crime, I don't know any crime he's committed except coming on here and lying about me. I still say he's as bad a person. That's what he is, in my opinion. Bad a person as that guy that we talked about a while ago.
Jim, for the record, Charles Manson, that we know of, killed 9 people and is considered the most. I'm telling you,
Squirrel is rotten as hell. And all I want to do was clarify he was wrong again. I just said the book was written in 1959. You notice how he twisted that lie. You know what he's doing. You've done it too. You try to imply that I was a junior in 1959, which would make me what? Probably 80, which is a lie.
It would. By the way, Charles Manson died, so let me make sure I get the tense correct.
I forgot
that he died a couple of months ago.
I'm making a point.
Jim, I was defending you, by the way.
Well, you didn't defend me. You never defend me. You love that guy to come on here and just lie. I don't like the show anymore.
Jim, I'm the one who said it was probably a fake account. It wasn't a fake account.
It wasn't a fake account. It was my account.
I was trying to help you, but since you...
you're not going to help me by lying. Okay, thank you, Paul. Thanks for helping me so much. I really appreciate all your help.
I didn't know Jim, I don't know how would I know I was lying if I didn't know what the truth was?
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Welcome back. Glad everyone is here, and certainly looking forward to digging in on this next subject by Seth Emerson, who has been with us many, many times. He just made a move to The Athletic, which is one of the fastest growing, if not the most fastest growing sports website in America. And the headline of this article, 2 emerging Georgia Bulldogs and 2 looming family histories. One, Elijah Holyfield, and the other involves a young man named Rice who deals with a terrible tragedy. Seth, first of all, thanks for being with us, and glad you're here. Congratulations. When did you make the move to The Athletic?
Officially, my first day was Monday, and I've just been kind of quiet about it till they made their big announcement today. And the first call I made where I said, hello, this is Seth Emerson at The Athletic, was to Vince Dooley. So I didn't intentionally do it that way, but I thought that was a pretty good way to start.
I like that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Herschel Walker will be the next on your list. Glad you're here, and congratulations. It is a fabulous site for those who have not been to it yet. Let's talk about this story. I think I did a pretty poor job of trying to explain 2 young players, one with a famous father, one with a tragedy in his past. You did the story. I'll let you pick it up from there.
Well, Georgia just happened to make those 2 guys available last night, so I kind of scrambled for a way of, how can I write about both of them? And so I kind of developed that narrative myself. And obviously, Elijah Holyfield, everyone knows who his father is. And he's been kind of, in his shadow. He doesn't run from it. He embraces it, but doesn't carry it around with him all the time. He was actually raised principally by his mother, and make sure that everyone knows that was, a big part of his story as well. He's a guy who a lot of Georgia fans have had interest in him because he's a tailback, and I think the Georgia second or third string tailback is always one of the more popular people on the team at Georgia, much like the backup quarterback is the most popular player for everyone else. And this might be Elijah's time to shine. I think you might hear a lot about Elijah coming out of G-Day on Saturday, because DeAndre Swift, who would normally be their starting tailback, is not going to play. I'm anticipating he's going to be out, but he'll be back for the season. So anyway, it'll be interesting for Elijah. Monty Rice, not a lot of people know his story. His cousin was killed, shot by police last September. I would encourage people to read up on it. It would be hard for me to synthesize it down, in a 30 seconds or so. And it was something that was met with controversy. And, Monty has kind of held that out as something that he wants to be talked about or have talked about. And as he told me last night, he doesn't want his cousin to just be forgotten. So it's a reminder, Paul, that all these guys have a personal story. And, that's what I got in this business to do, is tell personal stories. And I'm thinking that at The Athletic, I'll have even more time to hopefully delve into things like that.
It's interesting. So I went to a symposium not long ago where I work, and they said we're a storytelling company. And, you forget that sometimes. We're so used to just who's going to win, what's the record going to be, and you forget that the stories really make it so much more compelling. Well, speaking of stories, Georgia has one of the best in college football. We just saw a stat that gives them about the third best or the second best chance of going undefeated. Alabama tied with them behind Clemson. I know some Dog fans could not be more optimistic, but are there any who are going, maybe this train has gotten a little bit ahead of schedule, considering who is going to be drafted in 8 days at the NFL draft, and in terms of transition, it may not be as easy as predicted. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good point. Whereas after the 2017 draft, last year's draft, when only one Georgia player was picked, Isaiah McKenzie, and I believe he was picked in the 5th round, and the reaction to that was, wow, Georgia, Mark Richt didn't leave Kirby Smart with that much talent. And I kind of pushed back on that, as did other people, and said, no, there's talent. It's just wait till next year's draft. And that's what I think you're going to hear next week when Roquan Smith goes in the 1st round. Lorenzo Carter, Isaiah Wynn have chances to sneak into the 1st round. Sony Michel, Nick Chubb, where they get picked. Sony Michel might go 1st round. I think it's going to hit home for a lot of people how much talent Georgia does lose off last year's pretty special team. Now, having said that, Kirby Smart and his staff have been recruiting really well. So it's a matter of how quickly that talent can come together. When you look at the schedule, Paul, in September, 2 games that are going to be really interesting. At South Carolina week 2, at Missouri week 4. I think most people would agree Georgia on paper is better than those teams. But both of those teams have returning veteran quarterbacks who can throw the ball. Georgia's going to have a lot of starters on defense to replace, potentially a very young secondary. That makes for an interesting matchup on the road. If Georgia can get through September unscathed, still got to go to LSU and Baton Rouge. You still got Missouri, or you still got Auburn coming in November. You have the cocktail party against Florida in late October. Georgia should be on paper better, but how good does Dan Mullen have Florida going? So there's a lot of stumbling blocks potentially for Georgia, but you do look at all 12 games on their schedule and say, if that game were being played week 1, Georgia would be favored. So the schedule could kind of go both ways. But
Seth, when I look at the schedule, I see exactly what you're saying, and having Auburn at home really helps, Tech at home. But it's a sneaky schedule at South Carolina, at Missouri, at LSU, right. at Kentucky. Those are not teams that you should be concerned about, but they're all middle of the pack, a couple of them, and South Carolina probably upper echelon of the pack.
Exactly. And when you're a Georgia team that's going to be as inexperienced as it's going to be relative to last year, that makes a lot of those sneaky games against kind of middle of the pack, upper middle pack teams so dangerous, which is why I think I still wouldn't be shocked if Georgia went 11-1 or 12-2, but I still would tend to, if you put a gun to my head, say, I might go 10-2. I don't know which 2 they'll be, but I think there's a chance of Georgia losing 2 games there that we don't quite expect. Like, there's always the team, Paul, that is much better than people thought, like Georgia last year. What if LSU makes a big jump this year? Then that game for Georgia at LSU is really tough. Like I said, what if Dan Mullen really has Florida going by the time Georgia goes with a cocktail party? And like I said, those 2 matchups with teams that should be good passing teams in the first month against the young Georgia secondary, I also put in that category.
Let's talk about the quarterback situation. A year ago, it was a competition. This year, people are looking past, but maybe not. Certainly Jake Fromm has earned his stripes. But what are you sensing and what are you seeing?
Well, I see in Justin Fields a guy who, we see limited portions of practice. We'll all see everything this Saturday. Justin Fields, he looks the part. He and Jake Fromm are actually pretty similar in height. I've heard from some people that, Jake Fromm is still the guy when it comes to passing the ball. He's more accurate. He's the guy that, we saw last year for Georgia. But Justin Fields has some moments. He has some real flashes during practice, especially when he's able to, freelance and run the ball. I've always said that as good as Justin Fields is, even if he's as good as advertised, Jake Fromm is not going to be the kind of kid who's just going to rest on his laurels last year and think that he's going to, still be the starter because of what he did last year. It's just not his personality. He's kind of got that Aaron Murray thing to him where he's always going to be in the film room. He's always going to be studying. So I think it's going to be really hard to displace Jake Fromm. I'll be really interested to see how Justin Fields does on Saturday and how much he kind of continues to push Fromm forward.
So much was made the other day about Trevor Lawrence, and we had a call from a Georgia fan who was unhappy with Lawrence ending up at Clemson. You mentioned Fields. I realize this is water under the bridge, but can you take us back to that and how everything's sorted out?
Yeah, Lawrence was the target. He was. I think Kirby may have even visited him the first day of one of the recruiting periods, even after he was still committed to Clemson but not signed. And then they didn't get Trevor Lawrence. It was pretty much a Georgia-Clemson battle. Lawrence commits to Clemson, and Georgia pretty quickly, kind of behind the scenes, but turns its attention to, they were going to sign another quarterback no matter what. And they turned their attention to Justin Fields, even though he was committed to Penn State. And Fields was an in-state kid, just like Trevor Lawrence, and he backed off the commitment to Penn State. And at that point, everyone kind of knew that Georgia had really entered the picture, and they got that commitment. And we'll see. It's probably something we're not going to know for another 2, 3, 4 years as to whether maybe it was a blessing for Georgia to miss out on Trevor Lawrence and get Justin Fields. Maybe it's the reverse, but I think this is a case where Georgia did try to get both. I don't think there was much of a lack of trying to get Trevor Lawrence.
Great stuff, Seth. Thanks. Congratulations again on The Athletic. We will talk to you very soon.
Thanks, Paul. Anytime.
Great stuff. Seth Emerson joining us, and we're up against a break. More of your phone calls when we come back.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast. Thank you for listening to the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast. Tune into the Paul Finebaum Show every day from 3 to 7 Eastern on the SEC Network or on the ESPN radio app.
Ryan! I don't know how else to say this, so I'll just say it.
What is it, Linda?
I think we should see other people.
Are you breaking up with me? On a roller coaster?
Well, we do have a lot of fun. Maybe we should stay together.
An emotional roller coaster? Surprising. What's not surprising? How much you could save by switching to Geico.
I just need a little me time.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
And welcome all back to the program. We have a lot to deal with today, more of your calls and certainly more guests to come. We showed you a headline a couple hours ago, an article by Tom Fornelli, and it is really some interesting stuff here about this new kickoff rule in college football. First, we're going to explain it. I'll let Tom explain it. I would never get it right. And he has some suggestions. Tom, thanks for the time. Good afternoon, and I hope your spring has been a good one. How are you?
Spring's been pretty awful, Paul. Right now I'm in Chicago, and it's snowing outside April 18th. So
yeah,
we've had better spring.
I've complained where I am in the South that it's we have. I think today is the first 80-degree day. It's been 40s and 50s, but I think I was reading someplace about Major League Baseball is close to a record already. We're only on the 18th day of April on postponements. Probably most of them in your town.
Yeah, well, the White Sox were actually in Minnesota over the weekend, and the entire series was canceled because of snow. So it's been that kind of fun, quote-unquote, spring in the Midwest so far.
Well, I won't ask again. Tom, thanks for being with us. Before we get to some of your ideas, explain this new kickoff rule to our audience.
Well, essentially what the new rule is, where it used to be on a kickoff, if you caught the ball in the end zone and you knelt or you just didn't come out, it was a touchback and you'd get the ball to 20, 25, wherever it was at the time. Now they're changing it to you can catch the ball in anywhere inside the 25-yard line, call a fair catch or just kneel, and it's going to be a touchback. So if a returner catches the ball at the 5-yard line and kneels, the team's going to get the ball at the 25. And the reason they're implementing this rule is because what they say is, they're trying to cut down on injuries because data and studies show that more severe injuries occur more frequently on kickoffs than any other play, which I think, if that's your goal, if it's to help alleviate injuries, it's a worthy, noble goal. It's just, I don't think that's what this rule change is going to do. Maybe it will, but I honestly don't see this change having an effect on the amount of injuries simply because players are blocking and running down the field and hitting each other long before they know what the returner is going to do. I think that what this rule is really being implemented for is that I would wager at least 80% of kickoffs at this point are now going to end up with touchbacks. And we're going to see where kickoffs kind of become just a pointless exercise. So that way, whether it's in a year or two down the line, when they just get rid of kickoffs altogether, which is what I think the end point is, it won't be as drastic of a change because I think football fans, college football fans, will be so used to kickoffs being meaningless anyway that they'll be crying for it at that point. They'll say, well, let's just get rid of it if this is what we're going to do. And I honestly think that's what the plan is here.
So what should be done, and how do you overcome this?
Well, my proposal was if you're going to get rid of kickoffs, and frankly, I'm not really 100% into the idea, but if it will cut down on injuries, great. I think that's good for the sport in the long run. But my proposal would just be base starting field position off of what the team who just scored did. So if you have the ball and you kick a field goal, the opposing team would then start with the ball at their 30. And that way, it's kind of it brings a little strategy into it. So that way, if you kick the field goal, yes, you're getting points on the board, but you're giving better field position to your opponent. Then if you just scored a touchdown, and I have it tiered where if you scored a touchdown from within the 20-yard line, the team would start with the ball at the 25, just like they do now with a touchback. If you scored from a 21 to 40 yards out, they would get the ball at the 20-yard line. From 41-plus yards, you'd get the ball at the 15. So essentially, you're punishing the other team more than just putting points on the board. You're affecting their starting field position based on whether you scored a 45-yard touchdown or if you just scored a 2-yard touchdown. And then also, like with pick sixes or punt returns, the other team would start at the 15 as well. And I think that what that would do is it would kind of change the strategy a bit. I think it would make coaches want to be a little more aggressive, particularly on fourth down, because they know that the field goal might help them with 3 points on the board, but it might have a greater effect to go for that first down and try to get the touchdown to pin your opponent back even further.
Tom Fornelli with CBS talking about the new rule. Let's get beyond that because after the kickoff, the actual game occurs. college football is a fascinating sport, but especially where I live, it seems like we're on a merry-go-round with the same 3 or 4 schools getting off and on the ride. You're in Chicago, a little bit more broad-based. Your view of college football right now as we begin to head into another season?
It's probably not all that much different than yours. I'm looking at Alabama and Georgia, trying to figure out which one of those two will win the SEC, and then they'll likely have to go through Clemson to get there. Really, out here, the only question is Ohio State going to win the Big Ten, or is Michigan finally going to have a year that's worth having as far as the hype that Jim Harbaugh has received in his time there? So I would say up here, our picture's not all that different from what you're probably dealing with on a daily basis.
And the debate has been, whether people have any control over it or not, and they don't, whether this SEC Alabama domination is really good for the game. Maybe it's more Saban. I don't know what it is, but how do you see it?
I understand where people come from when they question that, but honestly, I don't know how it's any different now than it's ever been. Because if you look at college football just throughout its entire history, at any given time, going into any season, are there ever really more than 5 teams that you considered a legitimate contender to win a national title? And I think the only thing that's different now is that Nick Saban and Alabama have been dominant for so long. I think that's what's different, is we're not used to seeing one team on top for as long as Alabama has been. But I think generally, I don't think it's a bad thing for college football to have a dominant team. I don't think it's a bad thing for any sport to have a dominant team, because at the end of the day, that's what people want to tune in for. Whether you're rooting for that team or you're rooting against that team, I think it's important for any sport to have a team that controls, the tempo, if you will, of the season. And I think that Alabama has been that, and we've seen Clemson come along and provide a real challenge for Alabama in recent years. And I think it's good that Georgia now is taking a trajectory where Alabama has more of a stiff competition within its own conference of the SEC, because as we've seen in recent years in the SEC West, which used to absolutely dominate the landscape, we've seen the other teams in that division kind of falter a little bit. And I think it's good for Georgia to step up and provide that competition. So I think it's always good to have the dominant teams, but it always makes things a little more interesting when there is more questions. So whether it's Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, or if anybody from the Pac-12 can find the consistency to be a real competitor year in and year out, I think that's always good. But I don't think it's a problem to have a dominant team, though.
Tom, if you walked into a bar on a Saturday night on Rush Street or wherever in Chicago and Alabama's playing somebody, and assuming that Notre Dame has already played, would you say more people are rooting against Alabama than for Alabama?
Against, by far. I think that's just the nature of the sports fan. Unless you are an Alabama fan, or unless you are the fan of the team that's the dominant team, you want to root against that team. It makes it more fun, and it's also, since it's a rarity when they lose, when they do lose and you actually root against them, it makes it feel a little bit better. But no, I think if you walk into any bar in Chicago on a Saturday during the fall, there are going to be more people rooting against Alabama than for them, unless they're playing somebody like Michigan or Notre Dame, simply because there's that rivalry within the city here, because there are so many Michigan and Notre Dame fans.
Might also be true if you walked into a bar anywhere in the South as well, outside of Alabama. Tom, we appreciate you coming on. Maybe the temperature will reach 40 tomorrow and you can get outside.
I'll bust out the shorts and the T-shirt if it does.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
And we welcome you back. Glad you're here, and more phone calls at 855-242-7285. Always looking for interesting calls, people we haven't heard from in a while, and we have that right now. Phyllis is up next. How are you, Phyllis?
Hey, Paul. How are you doing?
Phyllis, we are great. Tell us about you.
I'm doing better. I'm just taking one day at a time by the grace of God. But Paul, I just wanted to touch on something. I got really upset a while ago when Jim called, and he was so disrespectful to you. And he calls in at nowadays, well, he always has, but he's worse now, about calling your show and trying to run the show like he's in your seat and you're on the other end of the phone. I didn't appreciate the way Jim talked to you earlier. He was arrogant. and he calls everybody else a moron. He acted moronic. And, you know, I just wanted to say this, Paul. I know how bad Jim hates women, but, hey, Jim, I know you're listening. This is a woman. And I'm going to tell you something, punk. If you don't quit disrespecting Paul, ESPN, SEC, this entire network, I will push my wheelchair all the way to Tuscaloosa, and I will beat you half to death with my oxygen tank. Do you hear me, you little punk? That's all you are. There's nothing to you. There's nothing extremely great about you. You're no better than anyone else. God loves me, Paul, and everybody else just as much as he loves you. So come down off that ego ladder you're on, because you're a little bit too high. Your head's in the clouds too much. And, Paul, thank you for giving me a minute to tell him that. I love y'all. I love you. And roll tide. Roll tide forever.
Thanks, Phyllis. You continue. We'll talk to you soon.
God bless you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Hi, Man is up next.
Well, good afternoon, Paul Finebaum. You know, Paul, I've been around you several times, but I never noticed those clouds around your waist. I figured Jim just had his head up your butt. I didn't know they were called clouds, but I guess you are a cloudy kind of day.
Sunshine on a
Shall
cloudy
we
day.
gather at the river? Shall we gather? Throw down them damn crutches of man's life, Jim. You know, Paul, in 1959, when Jim was a junior in high school, I wasn't even 2 years old.
Man, correction, was 62 according to the record.
Well, the tweet says 59.
Well, no, we've corrected that.
No, we haven't. You just think you have. I tell you, you sure do protect that little rascal. I mean, to be such an old fart like he is, let me ask you this. What kind of injury do you have to sustain at 12, 13, 14, 15 years old to completely ruin and make you a bitter person the rest of your life?
Well, I guess you could start with a head injury.
That would be a good one. And the second
but
one
I
would be...
think he said once, that it was a hand injury.
And he probably got his nads caught on a fence. That would do it, too, I reckon.
Could be.
I mean,
Could be.
I mean, a head injury and a nad injury all in the same motion. Because he was hanging head down, so he probably hit his head on the ground and then fell eventually.
I thought he said he put his hand through a window.
A window?
Well, yeah, that too.
That's what that's what he said, Winder. And you know, I love it when he quotes me because he's been riding my coattails forever. But for this man to be this bitter for this long, I mean, to have and you've got young guys now calling this program, and you never hear them complain. Never hear them complain. They call in, and I mean, Jim has even got to the point that he's attacking a 10-year-old child for calling in your program, and you just said he was a great caller. He's a 10-year-old. But these kids never complain. They never complain. And that's an amazing thing to me. You got this bitter old fart over here, and then you got these kids coming up. Jim, that's the future. They are the future of this program. You are the long has been, worn out, never could have been complainer. And I just, what in the medical world could you diagnose that other than damn crazy? We are the Auburn Tigers. And Paul, I know you're going to be all tuned into Alabama 8-Day. And I know that now it's common for everyone to say, well, Alabama's schedule is a little down. Nick Saban has been doing this kind of scheduling since he's been there. He loves the team in transition. Now you got two quarterbacks, one that has a lost, faraway look in her eyes wondering if this is Kansas or not, and then the other one, he's got fragile fingers. Fragile fingers. Have a good day, War Damn Eagle.
Millie is up next. Hello, Millie.
Hi, Paul. It was so good to see Phyllis on. How's she doing?
What did you think about what she said about Jim?
Well, I agree with her.
She said she's going to roll her wheelchair up there and beat him with her oxygen tank.
Well, if I had the chance, I would take Sam and follow her on her coattails or whatever. That's my walker, by the way. I don't know. Does she have a name for her chair?
I haven't asked her yet, but I will.
Okay, well, anyway, you were talking earlier today about going on a cruise. You're going to love it. I mean, being on a ship is so much fun.
Never been on a cruise, Millie.
Well, I wasn't on a cruise. I was going from Germany. I mean, from the United States to Germany back in 1955.
That doesn't exactly sound like a Norwegian cruise.
Well, it was fun. We were there on the ship for a week, and my mother hated it like crazy because she was so scared of the water. But I thought it was a lot of fun leaning over and seeing.
Well, Millie,
the ocean.
can we count you? Can we count you in if we have a Finebaum cruise?
Yeah, it would be a lot of fun. There isn't anything that you can't. With the way they do things today, it's a lot more fun than, of course, I guess going to Germany or something. But the ships are
I thought
really
the final night of the cruise we could have a cage match between Phyllis and Jim. And we welcome all of you back. Glad you're here. 855-242-7285 is the number. It's been a pretty exciting first 2 hours. Let's keep it rolling. Larry is on the phone, and Larry is up next. Go right ahead, Larry.
Hey, Paul. I saw the picture of the cruise ship. Where am I at on there, Jack?
Larry, we took the people outside. You were inside at the bar.
Oh, I thought I might be driving that bad boy. I have been a helmsman on a big destroyer, guided it.
Do you have a license?
Yes, sir.
You're in. I feel sorry for any other boats out there or any small countries if you're in charge, but you got the job.
All right. Oh man,
we'll crash into Cuba at the rate we're going.
Yeah, baby. I noticed the squirrel worried about how many visitors. Squirrel, if you want these empty cans, I'll save them for you. I didn't know he collected cans, keeping up with how many I drank. But, my God, that man, when he calls in, he calls in about Millie or Jim. If you crack this head open, little naked Jims would run out with no faces on them. I mean, the man's eat up with the Jim syndrome and Millie, and just talk about football or somebody. You don't have to monitor my call. Paul does that. He does that button over there when he gets tired of listening to me. So just do your own thing and leave me alone, Jack. And Dan, what's up, brother? We gonna be on a cruise together? Dan.
Hey, I would go on a cruise with you anytime, Larry, but I'm not sure I'm going to let you be the helmsman just based on some of your other proclivities. I'm sure you got the experience, but you and me at the bar, that sounds a lot more better than you steering the ship on that
Larry,
one.
we will let you be in charge from about 7 to 9 a.m., and after that, I think we're going to have to take the wheel away from you.
Oh, man, that's the sad thing. Y'all could see me. You ought to watch me, man, when I park it. I mean,
so Larry, tell me about your experience at sea.
Oh yeah. I had we were tied up next to an aircraft carrier, and we crashed into it. And I was on the helms. I was running the ship.
So you helped crash into an aircraft carrier?
Yeah. Well, the captain gave me the order.
You have any idea how much those things cost, Larry?
I know, man, but I didn't take the heat for it. He did. What he done, he turned left full rudder too soon and too late, and it didn't take. And
when and where was this?
It was over a Westpac cruise over in the western part of the world. The Westpac, where Japan and all that is.
Larry, it's been 50 years. You can tell it's no longer any state secrets. We have good relations with all those countries.
Well, I have to be careful. FBI, CIA.
Yeah, no, Larry, we're good with Japan. Okay, we're Vietnam.
Okay. Well, North Korea, you got to worry about.
We're good with them too.
You think so?
We're about to be, or at least we're about to be good with them.
Yeah, but we
got Jim from Tuscaloosa over there right now meeting with Kim. Dennis Rodman wasn't available.
You the man, Paul. Who helped me come up with that? I'm meeting with Kim Young.
I won't ask you how to spell that because I don't know how either.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
I know it starts with a K.
I know, Matt. We straightened him out a little bit. Maybe I got him too far straight rudder. Maybe he would go back a little bit. I didn't mean to scare him, because we plan on meeting up in Atlanta. So he might scare him.
Save your breath. You sound like you're a little bit out of oxygen there. Arthur is up next. Welcome to the show, Arthur. Good afternoon.
How you doing, Paul?
We are great. Thank you.
Hey, I was just calling in. I was just so glad to hear from Phyllis. And, I don't know if you remember or not, but I called you back several months ago, and I was actually Phyllis's next-door neighbor back in the day.
Did you say you were Phyllis's next-door neighbor?
I was Phyllis's next-door neighbor in Logan, and Phyllis actually took care of my dad when my dad got sick. We were in between getting my dad in a nursing home, and Phyllis actually took care of my dad at my house for several months until we could get him in a nursing home. So anybody wants to downgrade Phyllis and talk about her, hey, I'm here to say that is the sweetest woman I've ever met in my life.
No, you're right. Listen, I've met her a number of times, Arthur. I couldn't agree more. Hey, thank you very much. Don in Memphis is next up. Hey, Don.
Hello, Mr. Powell.
How are you?
Yes, doing fine, sir. I hope you are. I want to kind of gripe about these new rules they're trying to put in there. I'm kind of tired. I'd like to see the old football and let them play football, Get rid of the review. I called you here a while back and said something about that because it just makes the game longer. It stops some of the drives. It works both ways, and the referees do a fine job anyhow, I think.
Well, I think they do too. I'm not against reviews, but they have to do them quicker though. They just waste too much time.
Absolutely, and I don't want people getting hurt either. But football is a rough game, and if they start playing flag football, I don't believe I'll be watching it.
No, you're right. It's a brutal game, in fact, and I know their intent is good. And thanks for the call. I mean, all this concussion protocol conversation is serious stuff. It's put the NFL in real danger, and college football is not that far behind, but I'm not sure this is going to be the answer. Hey, thanks for the call. I do appreciate it. Frank in Georgia, you are on the air. Go right ahead, Frank.
Thank you for taking my call, Mr. Finebaum.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk about Alabama's schedule.
Okay.
I know there's a lot of callers that think that the schedule is not formidable as it would be. But when I look back at last year when we played Florida State, it was the most hyped game. For the first game, it was the most hyped game in college football. Alabama, number 2.
No doubt. Well, Alabama was number 1. Florida State was number 3.
Right. And after that, we went through our schedule, and there wasn't a lot talked about it. But it seems that this year with us having Louisville as our first game, I mean, Coach Saban has scheduled a lot top 25 teams throughout since he's been at Alabama. Is that correct?
He has played an incredibly difficult schedule, Frank. I mean, he outside of 1 year since 2008, I think it was 11. He played Kent. He's played a legitimate opponent. I mean, everyone from Michigan to Florida State to Southern Cal. I mean, it's been the best you can possibly get. Louisville 2 years ago would have been a really good game. This year it just doesn't sound like very much. The issue isn't so much the schedule. Here's the issue. If Alabama loses a game anywhere in the season, can they overcome that? And I think that's the challenge that they're going to have. Let's say they lose to LSU or lose to Auburn. Can they come back? If they lose the championship game, in years past they've had that luxury. 2 years ago they could have lost the SEC championship game and they would have still gotten in.
Yes, sir. Isn't that every year?
No, it's not every year because last year they got in with one loss. But my point is that some years their schedule is good enough and the SEC is strong enough that they can overcome it. This may not be one of those years.
Yes, sir. SEC being strong, that is true. Coach Saban is a tremendous coach. It almost like when you listen to ESPN and other Fox Sports, they make it seem like that we're trying to set up ourselves an easy schedule so that we can have a clear run to.
Well, listen, Frank. I wouldn't totally agree with that. I just think it's some fans who are. I don't think any legitimate commentator is suggesting that an SEC schedule is an easy schedule. It is not. An SEC schedule is littered with landmines all across. It's what they focus on. And again, the media is a pack, and they tend to go in directions. And last year they turned on Alabama because the Florida State game didn't turn out to be a challenge after the fact. It was a tough game. Alabama struggled to get ahead in that game. They got ahead on a couple of turnovers and mistakes that they helped to create.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
And we welcome you back. We have all type of guests on this program, but our next guest, Zach Schonbrun from the New York Times, has just come out with a book entitled The Performance Cortex. Yeah, I'm already losing sight of what this is about before you are. The subtitle, How Neuroscience is Redefining Athletic Genius. There was a big piece on it in the Times, of course, where he works the other day, and under the heading, How Do Athletes' Brains Control Their Movements? For someone like me who can barely walk down the street and chew gum at the same time, I am really anxious to find out more about this subject. Zach, congratulations on the book. Critically acclaimed. We appreciate your time, and good afternoon.
Thank you, Paul. Great to speak with you.
Thank you. I'm usually in an interview. I make believe that I'm cognizant of the subject. But in this one, I'm throwing my hands up and say, I think I understand the concept, and I've read the Times piece. But not to confuse the audience, but in order to enlighten them, I'm going to ask you to explain the odyssey of doing this book and how you came about the idea and what process did you go through in order to report and ultimately publish.
Yeah, well, listen, I feel your pain. I mean, when I got started with this, I didn't have any neuroscience background whatsoever. I've been a sports journalist, as you mentioned, for the New York Times and other places for most of my career. And you know, the way this started was I noticed in an alumni magazine a little blurb about these two neuroscientists that were starting to do some work with Major League Baseball teams. And, you know, I'd heard about, brain gaming, kind of like the Lumosity type of stuff that had been going around and starting to get more popular among sports teams. And obviously mindfulness training and sports psychology and Zen Master stuff has been popularized in sports in recent years. But the idea that these were neuroscientists that were starting to actually figure out a way to peel back the helmet, so to speak, of a baseball hitter and see what's going on in their brains as they're making decisions to swing or not swing at a pitch. I just thought that was really unique and sort of a sign of what might be to come in sports. And they were using an EEG, which is a brain imaging device. It looks like a kind of like a metallic hairnet. And they're using it with major league, not major league, but minor league hitters, and you know, they're able to discern when these hitters are deciding to swing or not to swing. And so, you know, writing a story about them led me to this kind of an awakening and this understanding that it's not so much about the physical attributes that define athletes, even though that's what we're used to gawking and remarking about their physical statures and their speed and quickness and so on. Those are all contributions, but what's really underlying their performance is all taking place inside their brains.
Some critics have compared, and this is a tremendous compliment, compared this thought process to Moneyball. Now, obviously, it's a totally different concept. The great book by Michael Lewis, which really changed baseball in many ways. I know that we're talking about the science of statistics and probability versus the science of science, so to speak. But how widespread is this? And I know this is a big what-if question. Where do you see it going?
Yeah, so, what DeCervo, the company that I followed for the last 3 years, that's founded by the two neuroscientists who I originally wrote about, what they're able to do is they initially got started here not promising any performance benefits with their program. They were simply a data company. They were providing information to teams that to this point had not had access to that information, and that was information that was happening inside the brains of these hitters. And so they were giving the teams the opportunity to decide what they wanted to do with it. And there are two things that teams could decide to do. They could say, all right, we're going to test our hitters and see what they respond to neurally to different pitches. Say they're able to break down fastball, curveball, slider, and see how they're responding to those pitches, and say, okay, if we see that this guy is not responding quickly enough or is not responding to the level of maybe his teammates, can we work with him to improve that decision-making ability? And so you can reverse engineer essentially and use it as a training tool. And then the other avenue that teams were thinking about going, and I think this is where kind of the Moneyball starts to get involved, is that you might be able to figure out a baseline for what does it take to be a major leaguer or at least a successful major leaguer in terms of that decision-making ability. There's a small window in the timeline of a pitch that you have to decide to swing or not swing at that pitch. And these major leaguers, they live in that window, but you might be able to see if there's a prospect coming up, you might be able to test prospects and use that baseline as a screening or assessment method to figure out whether or not future players can successfully perform in the major leagues. So DeCervo was providing these teams the opportunity to go one of two ways. At this point, teams are kind of tiptoeing back and forth, trying to figure out which way is the way to go. It's still very nascent, though, Paul. We're still really at the forefront of this, revolution, this brain science revolution in sports. So I think it's something that bears watching over the years to come.
Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely fascinating to hear about, Zach. Now, I know I'm jumping the gun here a little bit, but can you get, is there any thought process by these people, these scientists, to get beyond just baseball into other frontiers?
Yeah, I mean, anything that involves a quick decision can be essentially quantified using this neuroimaging technique. I mean, the neuroscientists started with this idea by studying musicians and the way that they make changes in over the course of a song. They were studying cellists at the time. But you can really, you can use this technology to understand various other sports. I mean, you think about sports. We often, again, we think about the physical nature of these athletes, and we are focused generally on their physical characteristics, but their decision making of, let's say, a quarterback or a point guard leading the fast break, that's really the bread and butter for these athletes. And so you can use this technology to perhaps get a better understanding of that. To this point, baseball presents a little bit of a cleaner opportunity to see that decision making in action. It's one interaction. It's swing or don't swing. A dynamic sport like basketball or hockey, football, it's a little bit more complicated, but I think absolutely it's going to be coming and spreading into various other sports and other disciplines, whether it's police, military. You name it. I mean, there's really a lot of opportunity here for studying the ways that the brain impacts our decisions.
Zach, I'd like to have someone study me in determining which caller I go to next, because I always seem to be going to the wrong one. So maybe that's one way to incorporate that into our show. The name of the book is The Performance Cortex, How Neuroscience is Redefining Athletic Genius. It is just an absolutely fascinating conversation. Zach, best wishes to you on the book. I know it's doing incredibly well. It's just out. Hope to talk to you again soon. Be well.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. Nice talking to you.